Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Dr. Friedemann Schaub. And he's here to share with us his new book, The Empowerment Solution: 6 Keys to Unlocking Your Full Potential with the Subconscious Mind. So are you ready to break free from self-sabotaging survival patterns and transform your life? Well, today's show is just for you. Dr. Friedemann Schaub is a physician, researcher, personal development coach, and the author of the award-winning book, The Fear and Anxiety Solution. His research and advice has been featured in many publications, including Oprah Magazine, Huffington Post, Reader's Digest, Teen Vogue, and Shape. He's the host of the Empowerment Solutions podcast. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Friedemann Schaub.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, it is really the accumulation of 20 years of working with people that have felt disempowered in their lives, not necessarily just by the external circumstances they were in, but more often by how they felt about themselves, how they were struggling with their anxieties and insecurities, how they were noticing that they had these self-sabotaging patterns that they just could not break through. And it's kind of the follow-up book from my first book, The Fear and Anxiety Solution, and really goes into the nitty-gritty on how to change your life from feeling victimized and feeling small to becoming the owner of your life.
Have you ever been in a place where you felt that sense of disempowerment?
Well, I was struggling with anxiety myself for over 30 years. So yes, that definitely feels disempowering. And I had times of feeling the only way to control my anxiety was through OCD behaviors, which of course is not really controlling, but it gives you a false sense of control. But then there are also circumstances. You know, I was a physician, and I was specializing in cardiology. And I was certainly, after, being in that field I went through medical school, residency, but after 7-8 years, I just felt like this is a nightmare. I cannot just be in a huge hospital and basically running from one patient to the other, barely having more than 2 minutes per person, and then feeling good about myself in the evening. So I often stayed way longer, and I talked with the people after basically, everyone left, because I was curious, what's really going on? Why do you have heart issues? Why do you come back over and over again? What's going on that keeps you not staying in your health routine? So that was really my passion, and it was not sustainable when you are working in a huge cardiology ward. And so I felt stuck, and I woke up with panic attacks, that told me, how can you stay there another 25 years in such a, just unfulfilling job? And so I changed. First, I became a researcher and focused on molecular biology and had my PhD in molecular biology. And then I realized that I do want to help people, but I want to help people to empower themselves to actually be able to heal from anxiety, to heal from their physical ailments, to stay well. That really was my passion and purpose. And since the last 20 plus years, I have been doing that.
It sounds in many ways like you were able to find this place to work with your own anxiety. And so you've kind of built this roadmap for other people.
Definitely. I mean, I wish I would have had these books handy that I wrote when I was dealing with anxiety, because at that time, anxiety, I was a child when it started, wasn't really talked about much. And especially for children, there were no resources. And then later on, I just knew there were coping mechanisms for my anxiety, working harder, trying to reach higher goals. And at the night, drinking 1 or 2 glasses of wine, somehow that helped me get through. But the anxiety was still growing inside of me and festering. So I did not really understand what the anxiety was all about. And And what I really, through my work, especially with that deeper part of the mind, not the intellectual part, the conscious part of the mind, because from that perspective, anxiety doesn't really make sense. But when you go to that more deep subconscious mind, then you understand that anxiety is not, something that wants to torture you or some miswiring in your brain. It's really something deeper than that. I compare it to the wounds, the emotional, mental wounds. And if we would have physical wounds, if our body would be aching, well, the pain would tell us, well, look where this pain comes from, what's going on. And that's what we need to do with anxiety too. What's really underneath that? Is anxiety just a messenger of something deeper that we have to discover?
Now, you mentioned your first book before, The Fear and Anxiety Solution. Can you share a little bit about that book with us?
Yeah, it is a roadmap. It is a step-by-step process that helps you to first understand better what anxiety is from the perspective of the subconscious. And then it really deals with those three most common root causes for anxiety, which are unresolved emotional traumas or events. And everyone talks about traumas these days. But the problem is, we know we had traumas, and a trauma is very subjective. It doesn't have to be something everyone would feel the same, but if we feel traumatized, it is a trauma. But there's very little really written about how to resolve it and how to help people to grow not only beyond the trauma, but actually growing from the trauma. And so that's number one, just being able to really resolve that emotional baggage. Number two is when we are fragmented with ourselves, when we literally feel like two people, not in a schizophrenic point of view, but more in the sense of that, part of us wants to be successful and ambitious and go out and make a mark in the world, and the other one feels small and anxious and insecure and just wants to hide out. That's one example of an inner conflict of such fragmentation. That creates so much friction. That creates so much anxiety because you don't really know who you are, because you don't really feel like anything inside of you is steady and you can hold on to. So resolving that conflict is essential. And then the third one is about what we believe about ourselves. Like I had this limiting belief of only being acceptable, only being lovable if I really am achieving the highest goals. And so I found out 2 doctorates later that no, not true. No matter what I do, no matter how many goals I reach, it does not really get the anxiety under control. So those limiting beliefs are really important to understand and then eventually release and replace. And that's what the book explains how to do that.
The Fear and Anxiety Solution sounds like the perfect partner for the empowerment solution, and I can see why people would want to read both books. So do people tend to operate in like a survival pattern or survival mode?
Yes, that's exactly what I call it too. Survival mode and survival patterns. And there are certain, patterns that just repeat themselves. And those are those 6 patterns I'm writing in the empowerment solution about. And the patterns are basically just the entry points for us to understand that there are ways we are keeping ourselves in a anxiety-ridden comfort zone or an insecurity-ridden comfort zone that in the end really make us never fully engaged in life and never really fully happy and fulfilled. So those 6 patterns, just understanding that we all have them. That's a fascinating part. Sometimes people read the book and they tell me, well, I'm not sure if I'm, for example, if I have this invisibility pattern, which is one of those survival patterns. And what that basically means is that you're hiding out, that you're not wanted to become a target or be seen and judged and rejected. And I challenge them and say, well, you consider yourself probably pretty outgoing and someone who has a social network and is maybe someone who can be the life of the party. But are you showing your more vulnerable side to people? Are you actually talking about your own fears and insecurities, or are those invisible to most people? And that's where most people admit we are so afraid of showing weakness and showing that we are struggling. That's one of the biggest issues with anxiety, period, that we are feeling we are different. We are not like everyone else. And so we have to hide that flaw, and no one should know about it. And that unfortunately just creates even more that sense of anxiety, because we are feeling alone in the world and everyone can become our judge. And whether we feel we are extroverts or we are kind of recluse, this invisibility pattern is something we can outgrow when we go to the root of it, where it actually comes from.
So, is there a pattern when it comes to being in this survival mode?
Well, I mean, basically, we are hiding between different patterns. So we are hiding between two major patterns. Those are either to avoid anything that makes us feel uncomfortable, or to please others because we feel we need their approval to somehow make it through another day. And so those two big patterns are then subdivided in smaller patterns. But I think we all can relate to, to certain times in our life where we probably were struggling with procrastination, which is an avoidance pattern, or maybe we're struggling with feeling disappointed and victimized by certain people's behavior, another avoidance pattern, or we are finding ourselves as the pleasers and the helpers, or maybe, and this is a pattern that is also maybe not as common, but when you're in it, you really struggle, which is you're looking for the one person, this one person that will make the difference, the love of your life, your soulmate, or whatever you call it. And once you find that person, you put all your energy into that relationship and you are trying to make it happen. And you find out that you're actually ending up in losing yourself because you become codependent. You become so in the need of getting approval from that person that you're not really taking any time to find any kind of approval for yourself.
Okay, I'm sure there are a lot of people going, gosh, I could feel the burn of those comments. Because how often do you hear of people talking about, well, I'll be happy when I meet my soulmate, or all my dreams will come true when I have my forever partner, or however they choose to put it. And it seems like we're kind of making our happiness something that will happen in the future as opposed to something we can attain right now.
Absolutely. And we make it dependent on someone else. And when we are on that track, on this survival pattern, I mean, I have seen people that were on their own, successful, had friends, had good routines, but deep in their mind, nothing really mattered because they always were looking for the one. And when they found the one, then, what happened, unfortunately, is that sometimes they picked the wrong one. People that were taking advantage of them, people that were actually having some sociopathological behaviors. I mean, one client I describe in the book, she had the love of her life only to find out that he had several other women at the side. And even though she found that out, she didn't want to believe it. And so she kept on fighting and even contacting these women. And in the end, she was so distraught and so unfocused on herself and her life that she lost her business, she lost her home, she became an alcoholic. She really, really went all the way down just because she felt this love is really my either make or break situation. And it took her a really long time to understand that whatever she put onto this person, no one has the power really to make you feel worthy. This is actually unfair, even though, I mean, there were so many things wrong with the person she was with. But this is unfair to any relationship if we are making the other person the ones that have to give us a sense of confidence or self-worth. It's nice when this is an additional part of it, but we have to really go into relationships with our own sense of self. Otherwise, we are just leaning too hard on the partner we are with, and usually that is breaking the relationship.
So is having this sense of powerlessness, is that an illusion?
Well, it is an illusion because we always have the power to choose how we want to see something. You can be, let's say you're the victim and you really feel powerless. And as a victim, let's say you have been a victim of early childhood abuse, or you have been the victim of people that betrayed you, or the victim of your employer that unjustly fired you. When you're in this victim mindset, all you can see is the obstacle, the unfairness, the pain. And it becomes almost like your, identity, or this familiar pain/comfort zone you stay in. The power we have is not necessarily to make the past gone, or to, punish the people that treated us badly, or to change the people that, have probably long forgotten about it. What we have the power is to say that we ultimately can choose whether we want to grow and learn from the past and want to take that key of self-responsibility in our hands, or if we want to still stay in this victim triangle where we are ultimately waiting for someone to again victimize us because we believe that the past only repeats itself. And this power to choose, who do I want to be? Am I now defined by what happened to me, or am I defined by what I do now? Am I defined by someone's wrongdoing, or can I take responsibility and ask myself, why did this happen? And how did this happen? And what can I actually learn from this about myself? That is the power we all have.
So how does our subconscious play a role in all of this?
Well, the subconscious is, I think, the key to it all. I mean, it's a key to a successful and fulfilling life. I mean, without the subconscious, we don't feel anything. Without the subconscious, we don't have any values. We don't have any inner guidance system. We don't have intuition. Without the subconscious, all the memories would be gone because the subconscious carries all the memories. Most of what we do is really controlled by the subconscious mind. We are very little consciously in charge or consciously aware. I mean, you just think about driving to work, you're not really paying attention because you're already somewhere else, or you're eating in front of the screen and you're not stabbing your eye. Why? Because the subconscious makes sure that even though you're not paying attention to what you put in your mouth, that still the food gonna find your mouth. And so the subconscious is extremely powerful, and it has a big flaw because it is like a super nanny. And that super nanny jumps in early in our lives, way before our conscious mind can even start forming a sentence. The subconscious already pays attention to everything. And there have been studies that show that we are subconsciously already picking up whether the world feels safe and whether we are wanted in the mother's womb. So the subconscious is really basically out there to make sure that we survive. And so it creates these survival patterns and the beliefs that come with it. And it holds on to the traumas as reference sheets because it wants to make sure that this doesn't happen again and that we're going to make it through another day. So we need to learn to teach the subconscious mind that it's no longer necessary to keep us in survival mode. We need to learn to collaborate with the subconscious mind consciously. And that's what most people don't know how to do. Well, I didn't learn it in school for sure, neither in medical school. So this is something that's a beautiful set of tools and skills we can acquire. And that's what these books are also teach you and show you, that help us to be on conscious subconscious alignment. See, if the subconscious doesn't get any input from the conscious mind, it pretty much just keeps on going and stays in those childhood patterns, and it doesn't really let us to grow out of them. And so that's where we really have to see that there are ways to speak the language of the subconscious, and those ways certainly, are very effective for the subconscious to also change its mind.
I really like the analogy you use in your book about how it's like navigating through New York City with a map that was done in 1965.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, that's as a simple example, you are really a person who feels very good in her work, and you would just get a lot of positive feedback and do a lot of creative and courageous choices. But you still carry a belief inside of you that you're not really that fun or that likable. And so when you go in social situations, let's say you're invited on a party and you don't know a lot of people, all of a sudden you feel like shrinking down to the size of the 14-year-old who hadn't anybody to go with for the proms, or you still feel like the outsider who just better goes into the corner and disappears. And it doesn't make any sense. Just like it doesn't make any sense when mom, scolds us for something that we, didn't clean the shoes or whatever, or we're looking too thin or too not thin enough. And we feel exactly like we felt when she did this when we were younger, because the subconscious sees those triggers as ways to respond. And all of a sudden, the subconscious time machine is activated, and we do see the world through the eyes of more a younger self and not the person we became. And I mean, I remember before I worked with my subconscious, it took me about 36 hours visiting my folks to return back to being a 15-year-old, even though I was in my 30s. So it's definitely something most of us do.
So, is there a way for us to really work or communicate with our subconscious mind that is maybe a simple practice? I know you go through great detail in your book, but I'm thinking maybe our listeners can start a simple practice right now.
Well, I think the subconscious, is not very hard to communicate with because we're doing it all the time. We are doing it when we watch movies. We are doing it when we read a book. We're doing it when we are daydreaming. We are doing it when we are going back in our mind and, reliving certain situations that we felt something about, maybe happy or embarrassed or worried, whatever it is. The point is just that there is something that our subconscious needs other than words, because we sometimes feel like, well, the way to communicate, of course, is words. And so we are taught that use affirmations. That's going to work with the subconscious. Well, it doesn't, because the subconscious doesn't really understand words, but it understands feelings. It understands sensations. It understands visualizations. It understands sound and music, anything that somehow makes us feel and sense something. That's what the subconscious is good at. And so if you want to, let's say, use an affirmation, make sure that you feel the words. I am confident and calm and at peace. Well, if all those words have no really emotional reference, they're not sinking into the subconscious. But if you remember, what does it mean to be at peace? Let's say Sunday morning, you're still snoozing around and that feels very peaceful, or what it feels to be confident. You remember when you were a young athlete and you did the goal winning touchdown or whatever. When you just have those moments that really have an visceral effect on you. Oh, your subconscious knows exactly what you want and exactly what you're trying to do, and it follows you. So use visualizations if you want to change something, and also use positive emotions when you want to get out of a negative emotion. We cannot logically get ourselves out of anxiety, but we can use, for example, one emotion that I find is incredibly powerful and absolutely underutilized, which is compassion. If we, every time we were anxious, would have compassion for ourselves, we would certainly not struggle so much. But instead, when we're anxious, we get anxious because it feels so bad being anxious. And so the anxiety is met with more anxiety, or maybe with frustration, or maybe this feeling of, oh, I don't want to deal with this now, let's turn the TV on. all of those things are not helping because the subconscious feels ignored. It feels like, okay, you're obviously scared of yourself, so that scares me. Or you're mad, so that's, you become now the enemy, the perpetrator, because you're mad at whatever inside of you is anxious. So it's really important to try a new approach when you're feeling anxiety and just try to see the anxiety as something. That's why I think this idea of the anxiety looking like the younger version of yourself, like a child that's cowering in the corner and crying and being scared, it's easier to feel compassion for that child. And when you have that sense of compassion, it's like a soothing, a healing balm for the anxiety.
Wow, that is so profound. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Dr. Friedemann Schaub in regards to his new book, The Empowerment Solution: 6 Keys to Unlocking Your Full Potential with the Subconscious Mind. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Every day, pets are surrendered and abandoned. For these helpless and hurting animals, Paws Humane Society acts as a voice for the voiceless, providing hope for a brighter future. You can make a difference in the life of a shelter pet. Become a humane hero today. Just $10 a month will provide much-needed food, shelter, medical care, and love. It takes a community. It takes heroes like you. Together we can. Together we will. Together we are Paws Humane. Visit pawshumane.org to be a hero in every animal story.
Lindsay Roy's new book, The Gift of Perspective, is a must-read. Lindsay's unique life stories of surviving and thriving after 2 major life challenges is a wonderful companion to start your new year. It's a great guidebook for anyone facing a challenge, big or small, in business or in life. Lindsay's own stories and the anecdotes of those she met along the way help illuminate real ideas in real circumstances, drawing out reflections and actionable takeaways for all. Full of faith, grit, and humor, this book has the power to change how you see things. The Gift of Perspective is available at Amazon, or visit Lindsay's website at lindsayroy.com.
Are you an actor, public speaker, or an executive telling your story over Zoom? Jean-Louis Rodrigue and Scott Weintraub's new book, Back to the Body, takes the process they use to coach top Hollywood talent like Margot Robbie, Jack Black, and Ke Huy Quan and makes it available to everyone. Using your body and its energy as a point of departure, your work will gain an enhanced level of performance and depth. Back to the Body, available on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest, Dr. Friedemann Schaub, who's here sharing with us his new book, The Empowerment Solution: 6 Keys to Unlocking Your Full Potential with the Subconscious Mind. So in your book, you talk about how our beliefs cannot be erased unless they're replaced. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think, we fight with our limiting beliefs if we are aware of them. If we're aware of them, like, I'm feeling ugly, or I'm looking old, or no one likes me, or, I cannot reach my goals, all those limiting beliefs. And we just don't want them. We feel like, well, this is stupid. I don't want to, live like that. But for some reason, the beliefs don't go away. Just wishing them away keeps them still around. And the reason for that is very simple. They have been the railing for the subconscious to hold on to. It believes, well, as long as you feel like that you are not good enough, you're not putting yourself out there, you're not trying something that potentially gives you a lot of visibility, and then you only get rejection and get in trouble. So it's okay to not feel good enough because it prevents you from getting hurt. So that's the logic of the subconscious. And so if you're saying, I don't want to feel I'm not good enough anymore, I want to just live my life, well, the subconscious has no orientation. There's nothing to hold on to. There's, if you would be a train, well, if you don't have any railway tracks, where do you go? So you have to literally lay out new tracks, and you have to decide, what do I want to believe instead? Well, I can reach my goal, or I'm capable, or I know that I have certain gifts and talents and I have shown them many times in my life. And it shouldn't be a new belief that's totally out there, like you're broke and you're telling yourself, I'm a millionaire. Well, your subconscious says you're definitely out of your mind. So let's keep this old belief. So it needs to be a belief that's believable, but a positive belief, a belief that gives your subconscious another way of looking at it. And that's at the beginning all we need. It's almost like we are, going back to the railway tracks, you're just at a junction. You see left side, yeah, I can still go down into this I'm not good enough feeling and the belief and my patterns that come from it. Or I can also I have the resources inside of me to create a better life. And so then you can also try that out. And eventually the subconscious switches onto the new belief if you are reinforcing it with positive feelings. If you're really showing the subconscious, I like it. I like to have small successes. I like to wake up in the morning being motivated. I like to be consistent. If you're telling the subconscious growing and becoming more and more empowered feels good, your subconscious wants to make you feel good. So it's going to more and more go that direction.
In your book, you talk about self-responsibility. How is that different when we look at our past as to like self-blame?
Well, it's kind of the opposite because self-blame is finding fault. It's basically finding fault and being your own judge and saying it was all me. But self-responsibility is basically saying that, everyone is a teacher and a student for each other. That's just how life is. And me as a student of the person who betrayed or hurt or abused me gives me the opportunity to look closer. What can I actually learn from that? I mean, we can learn from an abuser that we don't want to become abusers ourselves. We don't want to take power from others. We don't want to hurt others. But we can also learn, and this is what I see over and over again from people that have been abused, especially in their childhood, that they became compassionate and kind and good adults who didn't want to harm anyone, who actually want to do good. And that taking a responsibility says, I am not any longer at this victim place of someone having hurt me. I actually outgrew it because I chose goodness. I chose kindness. I chose the light over darkness. And that makes people realize that ultimately nothing could really touch them. Whatever happened was certainly traumatic and terrible, and they wish it wouldn't happen. But what they became is something that they feel proud of. And they know that what makes really, truly them as human beings is so much more powerful than what was done to them. In some ways, it's almost a feeling like, I won. This person couldn't really diminish or annihilate this core essence, this goodness inside of me. I did not become like that person. And that's realization. That's a form of self-responsibility.
Thank you for taking the time to explain that. I think it's something that people might ask because they look at their past going, okay, well, maybe I didn't do all the things right and get into the self-blame, kind of perspective. Is it something that takes a little practice to get to this point where they are able to be in this self-responsibility without the blame?
Well, I think blame is basically just looking for an explanation. When things happen to us that are difficult and traumatizing, the subconscious is confused. It just doesn't really know exactly why. And so it tries to look for answers. And blame is one way to get an answer. Well, it must be me. I must have done something wrong. And when you take responsibility, you look at this. Is that really true? Is it really me? Or did I at that time just simply do the best I could? An example is, again, back to abuse, because unfortunately it's so common that, let's say, a young child had been abused by an adult and he or she didn't say anything. They just, were frozen. There was no fighting back. They were just letting it happen. And that's a very common blame. Why did I let it happen? Why did I not say something? Why did I not call for help? And just taking this moment of self-responsibility and saying, this is really in that moment all I could do. This is where I felt like if I actually say something, maybe it's going to get more violent or even more hurtful. And so just leaving my body literally and just, feeling like I'm just going to come back when it's over. That was at that time, with this little power that you had, the best option. And then you're going out of blame into compassion for that person that you were at that time. And that heals a lot. And then, in the book, I describe also a way then to disentangle from the abuser or disentangle from the person that victimized us. And that's a very powerful process, because in the end, it really creates like a line in the sand. It's kind of a resolution to no longer let that energy and that trauma affect you.
That self-compassion piece is so important. And I know you have this whole chapter in your book about that I want to dive into in just a little bit. But before we go there, I know you talk about the avoider and the pleaser and these different patterns in your book. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely, in general, more patterns than only the avoider and the pleaser, but I find them the most common when it comes to anxiety and insecurity and just somehow playing it safe in the world. So that's why I focused on those. And I subdivided them in the most common ways they are expressed. So there is the victim, the invisible or the invisibility, and the procrastination pattern, which is basically, again, everything about avoiding pain, avoiding rejection, avoiding hurt. And then there is a pleaser, which is a chameleon, which is the person that basically is just trying to fit in at all costs, which is so common these days. I would say, especially with younger people, that feel so often without really a clear guidance system on who am I supposed to be? What are the belief systems I'm supposed to have? What am I supposed to like? Which direction am I supposed to go? Well, let's look at all these influencers on social media. Maybe they can tell me. And because everyone tells something else, they become really overwhelmed. And they become also in a place of just, maybe I should look like this. Maybe I should try this. Maybe I should talk like this. And that's a chameleon pattern. And when you're in the chameleon pattern, you literally feel like that you have no home inside of yourself. You always just want to have someone tell you, okay, you belong here, or you fit in here, or we're gonna, take you in for a moment there. It's a very, very lonely and stressful way to be. And then there is the helper, pleaser pattern. That's more about doing something for someone and hoping to get some approval back. And as I said before, the lover pattern. Now, the patterns that I described are not just, something that you only read the pattern that you feel like is in your face, because every pattern is then resolved through a key of empowerment. And so all the keys are useful for anyone, no matter if you feel like you have this lover pattern or the pleaser pattern or not, because all those keys are what I wish my parents would have told me about how to be the creator of my life. And I think lots of people haven't gotten really those keys in their hands, because if they had it, their life would be so much more fulfilling, and they would have also so much more success in their lives.
Does that allow us to come to this place where we can then have compassion for our parents, because then they were also doing the best they could with what they had?
Yes, absolutely. And that is where, the self-responsibility comes in. We don't blame other people, but you say, like, I can learn from their example. I can learn from their mistakes. I can understand that this is something that I don't want to repeat. I'm not, forced to now say, well, my parents didn't give me this and that, and that's why, my life is screwed up. I can actually take responsibility and say, no, thank you, parents, for showing me what happens if. My parents worked so hard. They were worried pretty much all their lives. And there were very few years where they just were at peace. And then, I think very young, they died. So looking at their lives and seeing how much of their life was about that stress, worry, and always looking ahead versus really being present in the moment, I'm very grateful for that, because it does make me more aware and more mindful on the fact that we all have, at some point, one thing we run out of, which is our time. So we have to really be more mindful with that. And that's a lesson certainly my parents, through their examples, taught me.
I think a lot of people don't realize how lucky we are to have the time that we do. We just go throughout our day, one stress point to another, not really paying attention to the gifts that we have in front of us.
Definitely, absolutely. Because we always want more. There's always this feeling of, well, there should be something else. There should be something that really makes me happy. See, I was there too. For me, it wasn't about consuming. For me, it was more achieving. When I reach this goal, when I have that level of success, then I will finally feel good and can relax. And it never happens, because what you really miss is the connection with yourself. And this is what this book ultimately is all about. It is about connecting to yourself and becoming your best friend, your greatest ally. Because I think in our especially so busy and hectic and demanding world, we don't ask questions. What do I want? Who am I? What's my purpose here? What really, really makes me feel fulfilled? Those things that take a little time to figure out. We don't really contemplate. We are running from one dopamine hit to another stress situation, to another adrenaline event, just because we feel like, well, maybe that's going to be it. See, this is what I often find so difficult right now for people, especially younger people, that they have not necessarily the patience to really stay consistent with something, to figure out that, well, maybe the deeper I dig inside of myself, the more of those treasures I will find. Because there is so much external stimulation and external expectation that really those questions that do need some stillness and do need to, have some time with yourself, those questions get ignored. And that's one reason why so many young people are now on antidepressants and anxiety, because they don't know who they are. They don't find a sense of self-worth just by being themselves. They think they have to achieve, they have to prove, they have to impress. It's a very, very hard way of being.
Earlier, you mentioned self-compassion. A lot of times I think that people have a very difficult time getting to a place of self-compassion. What are some of your practices around self-compassion that would help our listeners?
Well, I think, self-compassion is something that should be very natural to us, because compassion is a very natural emotion. There have been studies that showed even little children have compassion for adults, where, in the study there were adults dropping something or spilling something. And the children saw then that the adults were distressed and came then and gave a little paper towel or, just put a little hand on the leg to comfort. I mean, this feeling of, oh, so sorry that you're struggling. I have compassion for this struggle. That is so deeply ingrained, but we don't necessarily use it for ourselves so easily because maybe we didn't necessarily experience compassion from the outside as much. What I always find is, as I mentioned before, try to find compassion with a part of you that is easy for you to have compassion for. This hurt child, or the kid that was made fun of in school, or that lonely child that you were, who basically only had to be in her room because no one really interacted with them, or this child that was too scared to have friends and then went into its imaginary world. So this inner child work is really, really powerful because it does make you realize, well, at the core of me, there is something that feels sad and that feels broken or that feels anxious, and I can have compassion for that. And I want to help this child to ultimately find a way to be itself again. See, this is where these survival patterns usually start at a time that you can call when we lost our innocence. When everything at the beginning in our lives may have felt great, easy. We felt loved, we felt taken care of. There was, smiles, oh, you're so cute. And then something happens. All of a sudden, it wasn't so unconditional. All of a sudden, we did get scolded or get in trouble, or there were unfriendly people. And at some point, we are telling ourselves we have to be different. I write in the book how I felt I was a happy-go-lucky child, and just life was so magical and full of mysteries. And then school came along and I wasn't very good at it. And boom, I got in trouble. I got yelled at. And all of a sudden, having good grades was so much more important than exploring the magic of life and nature. And this innocent, happy-go-lucky child pretty much was locked away. And so bringing it back, bringing the person back into your life who you actually were and you're supposed to be before you were going into the survival mode, that is one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves.
I was very impressed with you have a deep exercise to uncover the hidden gifts of our innocence. And I found that to be so empowering, being able to walk through that. And I'm sure people who also pick up your book feel the same way.
I think it's a beautiful exercise because it really creates such a nourishing and compassionate relationship with ourselves, and it does bring back the memories of the things that we have forgotten about ourselves. I had a client who was an accountant and was absolutely good with numbers, but also constantly stressed and unhappy, and living in this idea of still, even though the father was long gone, having to impress that father. And then she realized through this work that she actually is very creative. And at the core, she always felt she was an artist, but she wasn't allowed to be an artist because artists, were not necessarily revered by her parents. And so in her 50s, she started to just become more and more into art and painting, and eventually she had her own exhibition. I mean, she just really finally was able to express what she had suppressed for such a long time. And I mean, it made such a difference from being ultimately, living in this gloomy cloud of depression to finally seeing like, wow, now I remember and now I can see why I'm here. I mean, it was just amazing to see. And I think we all have these hidden desires and gifts inside of us that when we find them, maybe we can actually realize that that's what we were looking for. Not another watch or another car or another party, but really that was the missing piece.
There's a chapter in your book I'd love to talk about, and that is procrastination. And of course, I'm leaving that for last, right? So I'd love for you to share with our listeners the procrastination pattern and why this is so important. Because a lot of times people think, oh, they're just being lazy, or, these people are unmotivated.
I mean, there is definitely, when we're procrastination and an unmotivation about it. But why are we unmotivated? Well, we are unmotivated usually because something feels either uncomfortable to do, or we are feeling not equipped to have that done successfully. So there is a fear of failure. I mean, even if you're procrastinating about cleaning your room or, going to the doctor, I mean, there is always a discomfort about it. And the procrastination says, I want to avoid your discomfort, and I want to avoid you having to deal with stuff that you don't want to deal with. For example, if you would clean the room, you would find all your unpaid bills, and that would be really uncomfortable. So let's just watch a little bit more TV, or let's look in the refrigerator and see what sandwich we can build. And that just is a pattern that creates its own hole that goes deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, it is, again, a self-protective pattern. The subconscious just says, you are not really equipped or strong enough or good enough to meet life's challenges. And so I'm just going to keep you safe by not having to deal with it. It's like a parent who doesn't want the kids to feel uncomfortable. And as soon as the kids say, I have a tummy ache, they don't have to go to school, no matter how bad the grades become. Now, for the subconscious, that makes all sense. For the conscious mind, it's very clear that soon after the procrastination, comes the regret, and then there comes more anxiety and the worry about, what are the consequences. And so the conscious mind definitely can do a lot for the subconscious pattern to be overcome. And I have written in the book at least 10 different things you can do. But one of the things that I find has helped me, because I am certainly also a procrastinator, like probably 90% of society, I found the realization that my confidence and my not procrastination were going hand in hand. The less I procrastinated and the more I followed through with what I said I would do, the more my confidence got boosted. It was like a direct relationship, and it was so fast. So when I started to say, okay, I'm going to promise myself tomorrow to tackle whatever this little corner of my life is that I have procrastinated around, not overwhelmingly big, not something that takes weeks, but gives me a fast sense of success. When I followed through, it was like, oh, wow, okay, this feels good. My word actually does count. I am actually someone who is, basically starting to take his life in his own hands. And that feeling, that good feeling, just propelled me forward to have more of those feelings. And that confidence that built and this trust in myself that got created, that made a huge difference.
Well, Doctor, I found your book, The Empowerment Solution, to be so, of course, empowering, but such an impactful book. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Well, you can go to my website, Dr. Friedemann, so DrFriedeman.com. I have a YouTube channel that is very active, Instagram, of course. I do individual breakthrough sessions. There is a program for people who want to work one-on-one with me, and there are video courses you can take about from anxiety to empowerment, and many, many free tools and subconscious guided meditations, self-hypnosis, and other articles. I mean, the website is really for anyone something to get started on that journey to empowerment, and most of it is absolutely free. So check it out and take advantage of what's out there. Just I think we all have this ability to get to that next level. We just have to take the first step and not bounce around from one to the next and try this for a little bit and that for a little bit. If we are committing to one journey and seeing it through, we will be surprised how far we can get.
Well, Doctor, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Schaub. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Empowerment Solution: 6 Keys to Unlocking Your Full Potential with the Subconscious Mind. The Empowerment Solution's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. And remember, support our indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.